Captain Aisha Rahman sat at the controls of Flight 307, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner gliding smoothly at 35,000 feet. Beyond the windshield stretched a horizon painted in gold and crimson. Sunset at cruising altitude, where the world below looked peaceful and distant. Inside the cockpit, the gentle hum of the engines filled the silence, broken only by the occasional chatter of air traffic control. Everything was calm, predictable, exactly how pilots liked it. For Aisha, flying had never been just a job. It was the language of freedom. Ever since she was a little girl watching jets streak across the sky, she had dreamed of being up there, commanding one of those mighty birds. Now at 31, she was one of the youngest captains in the national fleet, respected, precise, and known for her steady nerves even under pressure. Her co-pilot, First Officer Malik, a few years her senior, smiled as he checked the navigation display. "Smooth sailing tonight?" "Captain," he said, adjusting the radio frequency. Aisha nodded. Eyes still scanning the horizon. "Let's keep it that way." Below them, 185 passengers relaxed in their seats. Families, business travelers, and a few tourists excited for their destination. The flight attendants moved quietly through the aisles, serving dinner trays and warm smiles. The atmosphere was peaceful. Then, at 7:43 p.m., everything changed. A violent bang shattered the calm, an explosion so loud it jolted the cockpit. The entire aircraft shuddered as alarms erupted from every panel. The left engine had burst into flames, its turbine torn apart by what would later be determined as a bird strike and compressor failure. Smoke streaked across the wing, and warning lights flashed red across the control board. Passengers screamed as the cabin lights flickered. Trays and cups flew into the air. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. "Engine 1 failure," Malik shouted, eyes wide with shock. Aisha didn't hesitate. Her voice was steady, almost unnaturally calm. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Flight 307 declaring an emergency," she said into the radio. "Engine 1 out. We're losing altitude. Request immediate vectors to nearest airstrip." Her hands moved with mechanical precision, disengaging the autopilot, isolating the fuel line to the damaged engine, rerouting hydraulic power, and recalculating thrust balance on the remaining one. The control yoke vibrated under her grip as she fought the turbulence that came with asymmetric thrust. Inside the cabin, chaos reigned. The flight attendants tried to calm the passengers, but fear was contagious. A mother clutched her child. An elderly man whispered prayers. The plane tilted slightly to one side, its left wing heavier from the damaged engine. Malik looked pale. "We're dropping fast, Captain. 2,500 feet per minute." "I see it," Aisha said. "We'll stabilize. Keep your eyes on the instruments." She took a deep breath, every bit of her military training kicking in. Before becoming a commercial pilot, she had flown fighter jets for the Air Force, F-16s, slicing through the clouds at supersonic speed. Back then, she'd learned one thing above all. Panic is the enemy of survival. "Fly the airplane first," she reminded herself softly. The left engine warning blared again, temperature spiking. "Fire detected! Engine 1 fire confirmed!" Malik called. "Activating extinguisher," Aisha replied, pulling the handle. A hiss echoed through the cockpit as fire suppressant surged through the engine system. The alarms dimmed, then fell silent. For a moment, they both exhaled, but the silence didn't last. "Hydraulic pressure's dropping," Malik said, scanning the gauges. "We might lose control surfaces." "Not if I can help it." Aisha adjusted trim and manually redistributed hydraulic flow from the right engine. The aircraft responded sluggishly but steadily. Through the windshield, the sky had darkened into deep violet. Far below, the landscape stretched endlessly. Mountains, rivers, no cities in sight. The nearest major airport was more than 100 miles away. "Tower, this is Flight 307. We've lost one engine and have possible hydraulic issues. Requesting emergency landing clearance," she transmitted again. "Flight 307, roger. Nearest available strip is Delta Airfield, 60 nautical miles northeast. You're cleared for immediate diversion." "Copy that," Aisha said. Turning to heading 075, Malik hesitated. "That's a short runway, Captain." Aisha gave him a quick glance. Better a short runway than no runway. She could feel the exhaustion creeping in, the physical strain of holding the aircraft steady. the mental pressure of 185 lives depending on her. But she didn't allow fear an inch of space. Every checklist, every decision, every second mattered. The cabin intercom buzzed. "Captain, passengers are panicking. Can we give them an update?" a trembling flight attendant asked. Aisha pressed the button. "This is your captain speaking. We've experienced an engine malfunction, but the situation is under control. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened. My crew and I are trained for this. You're safe. We will be landing shortly." Her voice was calm, even comforting. In the cabin, some passengers wept softly, but a sense of order began to return. Malik looked at her with disbelief. "How are you this calm?" Aisha smiled faintly, her eyes still fixed ahead. "Because they need me to be." Outside, lightning flashed in the distance. A storm was brewing, one more obstacle between them and survival. But Aisha tightened her grip on the controls, jaw set with determination. Flight 307 descended through thick clouds, one engine silent, the other straining against the wind. Inside that fragile metal shell, 185 souls held their breath, and one woman carried their fate in her steady hands. With one engine gone and fuel leaking fast, Captain Aisha Rahman knew every second counted. The right engine groaned under the extra load, its vibrations rattling through the cockpit. Warning lights still blinked in angry red across the panels, a constant reminder that Flight 307 was flying on the edge of disaster. Below them, the night sky was a chaos of flashing lightning and roiling clouds. The turbulence struck hard, making the aircraft shudder like a wounded bird. Aisha's hands gripped the yoke firmly, muscles tense, eyes never leaving the instruments. Every movement she made had to be exact. Too much pressure and the aircraft could stall. Too little and they would lose altitude too fast. "Altitude 12,000 and dropping," Malik said, his voice tight. He wiped sweat from his brow, struggling to keep up with the endless stream of warnings flashing on the screens. "Maintain descent rate under 2,000 feet per minute," Aisha ordered. "We need control for final approach. Fuel pressure's dropping on the right engine too," he added. "Switch to auxiliary pumps. Keep that engine alive as long as possible." Outside, lightning tore open the sky again, illuminating the silver body of the jet. The storm seemed to roar in defiance. The passengers could feel every violent shudder, every tilt of the wings. Children cried, some prayed, others just sat frozen, clutching the armrests, listening to the engine struggle for life. In the cockpit, Aisha's calm was almost eerie. Her breathing was slow, controlled, each inhale measured, each exhale a command to herself to stay focused. Years of Air Force discipline guided her through the storm. She had flown combat missions through worse. But this was different. She wasn't protecting herself now. She was protecting 185 lives that had trusted her without ever knowing her name. "Captain, we're 20 miles out from Delta Airfield," Malik said. "Runway's short, just over 5,000 feet. "It'll have to do," she replied. "Lower the flaps to 15 degrees. Let's start the landing checklist." He hesitated. "We're coming in too heavy, Aisha. We'll overshoot." A faint smile crossed her face. "Then we'll make it fit." The intercom light blinked again. A flight attendant's frightened voice came through. "Captain, passengers are braced and ready. We've secured the cabin." "Good work," Aisha said gently. "Tell them to hold on. It's going to be rough." She switched the radio back to air traffic control. "Tower, this is Flight 307. We're on final approach. One engine, minimal hydraulics, partial power. Emergency gear deployment required? Flight 307, Delta Tower copies. Fire and rescue are standing by. Wind 280 at 12 knots, crosswind from the west. You're cleared to land, runway 28. Aisha glanced out the cockpit window. Through sheets of rain, she caught a glimpse of the faint runway lights, tiny dots of yellow and white glowing through the storm. Relief flickered in her chest. "There you are," she whispered. "Gear down," she commanded. Malik flipped the switch. The sound of grinding metal echoed ominously. "Main gear deployed," he reported. "But nose gear's not locking. Override it manually." He pulled the lever again. The cockpit rattled. Then a loud clunk reverberated through the fuselage. "Nose gear locked," he confirmed. "Good," Aisha said. "We're committed to landing." The jet descended lower, slicing through the last layer of cloud. The rain intensified, pounding against the windshield. The runway was still barely visible, shimmering like a mirage through the storm. The radar altimeter beeped. 1,000 feet, 800, 600. Speed 160 knots, Malik read aloud. Crosswind increasing. I've got it, Aisha said. Her knuckles were white against the yoke. She nudged the rudder gently, aligning the aircraft perfectly despite the sideways push of the wind. Every gust threatened to throw them off course, but she countered each one with precision born from instinct and experience. As they neared 200 feet, she muttered under her breath, "Hold together." "Baby!" The passengers could see flashes of ground lights through the rain-streaked windows. Someone whispered, "We're almost there." A woman clutched a rosary. A man buried his face in his hands. Then, impact. The aircraft hit the runway with a bone-shaking thud, sparks exploding from beneath the fuselage. The sound was deafening, metal grinding against asphalt, tires bursting under the stress. The plane bounced once, then slammed down again. Aisha fought the controls to keep it centered. "Reverse thrusters," Malik shouted. "Right engine only," she replied. The damaged left engine was useless. The plane roared as the surviving engine went full reverse, helping to slow their descent. Rainwater and smoke sprayed across the tarmac. The end of the runway was coming fast. Too fast. Beyond it lay a dense line of trees. "Brake! Brake! Brake!" Malik yelled. "Full manual!" Aisha pressed down with all her strength. The aircraft screeched, tires burning, the entire frame shuddering violently. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the plane lurched forward one last time and stopped. The nose dipped slightly, and then silence. Not a single passenger moved for several seconds. The only sound was the rain hammering the fuselage. Then, as realization sank in, the cabin erupted in gasps and sobs of relief. They were alive, every single one of them. Aisha slumped back in her seat, her hands trembling for the first time that night. She could feel her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Malik stared at her in awe. "You did it," he said softly. "We made it." She took off her headset, exhaling shakily. "No," she said. "We did it." The radio crackled, filled with static and disbelief. Flight 307. "Delta Tower here? Captain Rahman, you just made the impossible look easy." Aisha allowed herself a small, tired smile. Outside, flashing red lights approached as rescue vehicles surrounded the jet. Firefighters rushed forward, dousing the smoking engine. Through the cockpit window, Aisha saw faces pressed against the glass in the terminal. People cheering, waving, crying. She looked down at her trembling hands and whispered to herself, "You held together, baby. You held together." For the first time in hours, Captain Aisha Rahman allowed herself to breathe. 3 days after the emergency landing, Captain Aisha Rahman stood once again on a runway. But this time, it wasn't behind the controls of a jet. She stood still, centered in a sea of uniforms and cameras, sunlight glinting off her pilot's wings. The national flag rippled above her in a soft morning breeze. The airfield looked calm now, almost too calm. Yet Aisha couldn't stop replaying that night in her mind. The thunder, the alarms, the terror, the moment when everything could have gone wrong. She could still feel the vibration of the yoke in her hands, hear the scream of the failing engine. Even now, when she closed her eyes, she could see the runway lights rushing toward her through the storm. But today was different. Today was peace. The ceremony was held to honor her extraordinary courage, an official recognition from the Air Force, the Civil Aviation Authority, and even the President himself. The world had called her a hero. The news called her the miracle pilot. Yet Aisha still felt uneasy with the title. She didn't see herself as a hero. She had simply done what she was trained to do: protect lives. As she walked toward the podium, the crowd stood and applauded. Reporters shouted questions. Camera shutters clicked in rapid fire. Her name echoed over the loudspeakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Captain Aisha Rahman, pilot of Flight 307 and the first recipient of the National Star of Valor for Civil Aviation." Her heart thudded softly as she saluted the senior officers. The weight of her crisp blue uniform felt heavier today, not from medals, but from memories. When she took the microphone, she hesitated for a moment, scanning the sea of faces before her. Families of passengers she had saved, fellow pilots, cadets looking up at her with awe. "I don't stand here alone," she began, her voice steady but humble. Flight 307 was saved by teamwork, by my co-pilot, my crew, the engineers who built that plane, and the passengers who kept faith even when the sky turned against us. We survived because we refused to give up. Her words carried quiet power. Even the wind seemed to pause. She continued, "Every pilot knows the sky can be unforgiving, but it also reminds us of who we are when everything else falls away. In the cockpit, there's no room for fear, only focus, and the belief that no matter what happens, you keep flying." Thunderous applause followed. Some of the passengers wept openly. A mother clutched her child, the same one Aisha had seen crying that night, and mouthed a silent thank you. After the speeches, she stepped aside as the national anthem played. The ceremony was almost over when an unexpected sound cut through the applause. A deep, rolling roar of jet engines from above. Aisha looked up instinctively. High in the blue expanse, 2 F-22 Raptors broke through the clouds in perfect formation, sunlight flashing off their titanium wings. The crowd gasped. The fighter jets descended gracefully, looping once before aligning directly over the runway. Her breath caught. She recognized their flight pattern instantly, the old Phoenix formation salute. As the jets passed overhead, their pilots tilted their wings outward in a slow, deliberate gesture, a salute reserved only for fallen heroes or legends of the Air Force. But this time, it was for her. The radio on the podium crackled to life. A deep, familiar voice came through. "This is Falcon 1 to Phoenix. You copy?" Aisha froze. That voice, she knew it. Wing Commander Zahir, her former squadron leader from her Air Force days. She reached for the radio, emotion tightening her throat. "Phoenix here," she replied softly, her old call sign rolling off her tongue for the first time in years. There was a pause, then the voice came again, stronger, filled with pride. "This is for you, Phoenix." The sky remembers its own. Her vision blurred as the F-22s roared past, engines screaming like thunder. They climbed sharply, leaving twin vapor trails that curved upward into a shining infinity. For a moment, it looked as if they were painting her name into the sky. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Aisha barely heard them. She stood motionless, eyes glistening. Memories flooded back. The days when she had worn the flight suit instead of a captain's uniform, when the roar of afterburners had been the sound of home. She remembered the camaraderie, the thrill, the discipline, and the endless blue horizon that had always felt like hers. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she smiled through it. The salute wasn't just an honor, it was a reminder that no matter what aircraft she flew, no matter what badge she wore, she was still a guardian of the sky. When the jets disappeared beyond the clouds, the sound lingered, a deep, comforting echo that seemed to whisper her call sign again. "Phoenix." Someone touched her shoulder. It was Malik, now standing beside her in his own formal suit. "They're right, you know," he said quietly. "You'll always be Phoenix to us," she laughed softly, brushing away the tear. "Once a fighter pilot, always a fighter pilot." The sun broke through the clouds then, bathing the runway in golden light. Aisha tilted her head back, eyes following the fading trails in the sky. For the first time since the crash, she felt peace, real, quiet peace. The announcer's voice carried over the speakers one last time. "Captain Aisha Rahman, protector of lives, hero of the skies." She turned toward the waiting reporters, her smile calm and composed. Yet inside her heart soared once more, not with adrenaline, but with gratitude. She had saved 185 souls, but in doing so, the sky had given something back to her too. The reminder that courage never retires. As the wind brushed her uniform and the echoes of the jets faded into silence, Aisha whispered to herself, almost as a prayer. Once Phoenix, always Phoenix. And above her, the clouds parted, just enough to reveal a single streak of blue, like the sky itself was saluting her in return.